The morning started like any other Tuesday at Luxury Motors, one of Atlanta's most prestigious car dealerships. Kevin had been working there for 3 years, climbing his way up from washing cars in the back lot to managing the entire sales floor. He took pride in running a tight ship, making sure every customer got the royal treatment they expected when buying a 6-figure vehicle. Kevin straightened his tie and walked through the gleaming showroom, checking that every car was positioned perfectly under the bright lights. The Ferraris sparkled like jewels, the Lamborghinis looked ready to leap off their platforms, and the custom Rolls-Royce in the center commanded respect from anyone who walked through those glass doors. Another beautiful day to make some dreams come true, Kevin said to himself, a phrase he'd picked up from his old mentor. He believed that every person who walked into Luxury Motors was there for a reason, and it was his job to figure out exactly what kind of dream they wanted to drive home. The dealership had a reputation to maintain. They weren't like those regular car lots down the street where you could kick tires and waste time. This was serious business. Their average sale was over $200,000, and their clients included business executives, professional athletes, and entertainment industry heavyweights. Kevin had learned to spot a serious buyer from across the room, around 2 in the afternoon when the lunch rush had died down, and the showroom had that peaceful, expensive quiet that Kevin loved. The front doors opened with their familiar soft chime. A tall man walked in, and Kevin immediately sized him up from behind the reception desk. The guy was wearing faded jeans with a few small holes, white sneakers that had definitely seen better days, and a plain black hoodie. His baseball cap was pulled down low, casting shadows across his face. He moved slowly, almost casually, like he had all the time in the world. Kevin watched as the man walked straight past the entry-level luxury cars and headed directly toward the most expensive section of the showroom. Here we go again, Kevin thought to himself. He'd seen this type before. Young guys who came in to take selfies with cars they'd never be able to afford, probably planning to post them on social media to impress their friends. It happened at least twice a week, and Kevin had gotten pretty good at handling these situations, quickly and professionally. The man stopped in front of their crown jewel, a limited edition Lamborghini that had just arrived from Italy. The price tag read $450,000, and it was one of only 50 made worldwide. Kevin had been hoping to sell this particular car to one of their VIP clients who collected rare vehicles. From across the showroom, Kevin watched as the man began walking around the car, examining every detail. He ran his fingers along the perfect paint job, something that made Kevin's eye twitch a little. Those cars were detailed to perfection, and fingerprints meant more work for his team. The man crouched down to look at the wheels, stood back to admire the lines of the vehicle, and even peered through the windows to check out the custom interior. His body language suggested genuine interest, but Kevin had learned not to trust appearances. Some of the best tire kickers were also the most convincing actors. After about 10 minutes of watching this performance, Kevin decided it was time to step in. He'd give the guy a few minutes to look around, maybe take a photo or two, and then politely guide him toward the exit. It was all about timing and tact. Kevin approached with his professional smile firmly in place. "Good afternoon, sir. I see you're admiring our newest arrival. She's quite something, isn't she?" The man looked up from examining the car's side mirror and smiled back. "Yeah, this is incredible. The craftsmanship is amazing. I've been following this model since they announced it last year." Kevin nodded politely. The guy seemed to know a little about cars, which wasn't unusual. Lots of car enthusiasts studied these vehicles online, even if they couldn't afford them. "It's definitely a special piece. Are you familiar with Lamborghini's limited edition series?" "I've owned a few Lambos before," the man said casually, turning his attention back to the car, "but nothing quite like this. Mind if I check out the engine?" This was where Kevin usually drew the line. Looking was one thing, but opening hoods and getting hands-on with the merchandise was reserved for serious buyers only. "Well, sir, I'd be happy to show you the engine, but first I'd like to learn a bit more about what you're looking for today. Are you shopping for yourself, or maybe doing some research for someone else?" The man seemed a little confused by the question. "Shopping for myself. I'm looking for something special, and this definitely fits the bill." Kevin maintained his smile but felt his patience starting to thin. That's great to hear. Now a car like this requires some pretty specific financing arrangements. Have you had a chance to speak with your bank about a purchase in this price range? The confusion on the man's face deepened. I'm sorry. What do you mean? Well, sir, this particular vehicle has a price point of $450,000. Before we start talking specifics or looking under the hood, I need to make sure we're all on the same page about the financial side of things. The man stood up straighter and Kevin could see he was taller than he'd first appeared. I understand the price. I'm interested in buying it. Kevin had heard this line before. I appreciate that, sir, I really do. But you'd be surprised how many people come in here thinking they can just walk out with one of these cars. The reality is we need to see some documentation first. Bank statements, proof of income, that sort of thing. It's just our policy. The man's expression shifted slightly. The friendly demeanor was still there, but Kevin detected something else now. Maybe frustration, maybe disappointment. I've bought cars here before, actually. I didn't need to jump through hoops like this. Kevin almost laughed out loud. This was a new one. Sir, I've been working here for 3 years and I know all of our regular customers personally. I think there might be some confusion. There's definitely confusion, but maybe not where you think it is, the man said quietly. The tone made Kevin a little uncomfortable, but he pressed on. He'd handled difficult customers before, and the key was staying firm while remaining professional. Look, I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I'm just trying to do my job. If you're serious about this car, then you won't mind showing me that you're qualified to purchase it. Qualified? The man repeated the word like he'd never heard it before. That's right. Qualified. This isn't a regular dealership where people come to browse around and waste time. Our customers are serious business people who know exactly what they want and have the means to get it. The man nodded slowly, seeming to process what Kevin was saying. And you've decided I'm not one of those people? Kevin felt like they were finally getting to the heart of the matter. Sir, I'm not trying to judge anyone. I'm just being realistic about the situation here. The man took a step back from the car and looked directly at Kevin for the first time since their conversation started. I see. Well, I appreciate your honesty. Something in the man's voice made Kevin feel like he'd just passed some kind of test, though he wasn't sure if he'd passed or failed. The conversation had taken an odd turn, and Kevin found himself wishing he'd handled things differently. But it was too late to change course now. Kevin could sense the shift in the atmosphere, but he was too deep into his routine to stop now. He'd had this conversation dozens of times before, and it always ended the same way. The person would make some excuse about needing to think about it or check with their spouse, and then they'd quietly leave. It was all part of the dance. So here's what I'm going to need from you, Kevin continued, pulling out his phone to access the dealership's standard pre-qualification checklist. First, I'll need to see a driver's license and 2 forms of ID. Then we'll need recent bank statements showing sufficient funds or pre-approval from a lender for this amount. The man in the hoodie listened patiently, but Kevin noticed his jaw tighten slightly. You're serious about this? Dead serious, Kevin replied, feeling more confident now that he was following protocol. Look, I get it. These cars are incredible and everyone wants to dream a little. But this is a business, not a museum. I can't have people handling merchandise unless they're legitimate buyers. Merchandise, the man repeated slowly, looking back at the Lamborghini. Is that what you call it? Kevin sensed he was losing control of the conversation somehow, but he pushed forward anyway. That's a $450,000 automobile, sir. Yes, it's merchandise, very expensive merchandise that requires serious buyers. The man pulled out his phone and seemed to scroll through something. Kevin assumed he was probably checking his bank account, maybe finally realizing that this purchase was way out of his league. Instead, the man showed Kevin what appeared to be a contact list. Would it help if I called my financial advisor right now? He could verify my assets over the phone. Kevin barely glanced at the phone screen. Sir, anyone can put numbers in their phone. What I need is official documentation. This is standard procedure for any purchase over $200,000. Standard procedure, the man said, nodding. Got it. Kevin felt like he was finally getting through. Exactly. Now, if you don't have that information with you today, I'd suggest going home, gathering your documents, and calling ahead next time. We can set up a proper appointment where we'll have time to go through everything properly. The man put his phone back in his pocket and took another long look at the Lamborghini. You know what's funny? The last time I bought a car here, nobody asked me for any of this. Kevin's patience was wearing thin. Sir, with all due respect, I seriously doubt that. I know how this business works and I know our procedures. Maybe procedures have changed, the man suggested. Or maybe you're thinking of a different dealership. Kevin shot back, his professional mask starting to slip. Look, I'm trying to be nice here, but I think we're wasting each other's time. The man's eyebrows went up. Wasting time? Kevin realized he'd said the quiet part out loud, but there was no taking it back now. I mean, unless you've got the documentation, I mentioned, then yes, we're probably wasting time. By now, their conversation had attracted attention from other people in the showroom. Janet, one of the newer sales associates, kept glancing over from where she was helping another customer look at a BMW. Two clients browsing the Mercedes section had stopped their own conversation to listen. The man noticed the audience too. So, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You're saying I can't even test drive this car without proving I can afford it first? That's exactly what I'm saying, Kevin replied, feeling vindicated that they were finally being direct with each other. This isn't some buy here, pay here lot. We don't let people joyride in vehicles worth more than most people's houses. Joyride, the man repeated, and Kevin could hear something cold creeping into his voice. I didn't mean any offense by that. Kevin backpedaled slightly. I'm just saying we have to be careful. Careful of what exactly? Kevin felt trapped. He couldn't say what he was really thinking, that the man looked like he belonged in a Honda dealership, not a luxury showroom, that his clothes screamed window shopper, and his attitude suggested someone who wasn't used to being questioned about money. Careful of people who aren't serious buyers taking up time that could be spent with actual customers, Kevin finally said. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Several other people in the showroom had stopped what they were doing entirely. Janet looked mortified and kept shaking her head slightly, trying to signal Kevin to tone it down. The man in the hoodie stood perfectly still for a moment, studying Kevin's face like he was memorizing it. Actual customers, he said softly. That's right, Kevin replied, though some part of his brain was screaming at him to stop talking. People who are here to buy cars, not just look at them. And you've decided I'm not one of those people. I've decided that someone who's serious about buying a $450,000 car wouldn't have a problem showing they can afford it. The man nodded slowly. I see. So if I understand correctly, you're refusing to let me test drive this car. Kevin felt like he was on solid ground again. I'm following company policy. No test drives without pre-qualification. Company policy, the man repeated. That's right. The man looked around the showroom at all the faces watching their conversation. Janet had abandoned her customers entirely and was walking over, probably, planning to intervene and try to save the situation. Kevin, is everything okay over here? Janet asked, her voice bright with fake cheer. Everything's fine, Kevin replied. I was just explaining our pre-qualification process to this gentleman. Janet looked between Kevin and the man, clearly sensing the tension. Maybe I could help? Sometimes a fresh perspective can... No need, the man interrupted gently. Kevin here has made your dealership's position very clear. Sir, I hope you understand that we're just trying to... Janet started. I understand perfectly, the man said, cutting her off, but not unkindly. Kevin doesn't think I belong here. The directness of the statement made Janet's face go pale. Oh no, sir, that's not what we meant at all. We welcome everyone here regardless of what? The man asked, and Janet realized she was about to step into the same hole Kevin had dug. Kevin jumped back in, feeling like he needed to control the narrative. Look, this isn't personal, this is business. We have standards here, and part of maintaining those standards is making sure people are qualified before they handle the merchandise. There's that word again, the man said. Merchandise. Yes, merchandise. These are expensive cars, not toys. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. For a split second, Kevin thought he was going to see car keys for some beat-up Honda, which would prove his point perfectly. Instead, the man held up a key fob that Kevin recognized immediately. It was from a Bugatti Chiron, one of the most expensive cars in the world. Just out of curiosity, the man said, holding the key so Kevin could see it clearly, "What would you say if I told you I paid cash for my last car?" Kevin stared at the key fob, his brain trying to process what he was seeing. Bugatti Chirons. Started at $3 million. Nobody bought those as a joke or to show off. You couldn't even fake owning one. The keys were specially coded. "I'd say that's a nice key fob, but anyone can buy those online," Kevin managed, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. The man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile anymore. "Anyone can buy them online. That's your explanation." Kevin nodded, though he was starting to feel less sure of himself. "Well then," the man said, putting the keys back in his pocket, "I think we're done here." He turned and started walking toward the exit, moving with the same casual pace he'd used when he first entered. Kevin watched him go, feeling like he'd just won something, though he wasn't entirely sure what. As the man reached the door, he turned back one more time. "You know what, Kevin? You're absolutely right about one thing." "What's that?" "This conversation was definitely a waste of time." The door chimed softly as it closed behind him, leaving Kevin standing next to the Lamborghini with half the showroom staring at him. The showroom felt different after the man left. Kevin tried to shake off the weird feeling in his stomach and get back to work, but everyone kept looking at him like he'd done something wrong. Janet walked over with that concerned expression she got when she thought someone had made a mistake. "Kevin, what was that about?" she asked quietly, glancing toward the door where the man had just exited. "Just another tire kicker," Kevin replied, straightening his tie and trying to project confidence. "You know how it is. They come in looking at cars they can't afford, waste our time, then get upset when we ask them to prove they're serious." Janet didn't look convinced. "But that key fob he showed you could have been fake, could have belonged to someone else, could have been anything," Kevin said dismissively. "Trust me, I've been doing this long enough to know the difference between a real buyer and someone just playing around." Janet shrugged and walked back to her desk, but Kevin could tell she wasn't buying his explanation. The other customers in the showroom had gone back to their browsing, but there was still an uncomfortable energy in the air. Kevin decided to focus on paperwork for a while and let things cool down. About 15 minutes later, his phone rang. The caller ID showed it was coming from the main office upstairs. Kevin's boss, Mr. Rodriguez, rarely called down to the showroom unless something important was happening. Usually it was good news, a big sale had gone through, or a VIP client was coming in and needed special treatment. "Kevin, I need you in my office right now." Mr. Rodriguez's voice sounded strange, not angry exactly, but definitely not his usual friendly tone. "Sure thing, boss. Everything okay? Just get up here and bring the interaction log from today." Kevin felt a small knot form in his stomach. The interaction log was something they only pulled out when there was a customer complaint or some kind of problem. But what could have gone wrong? The guy in the hoodie had left without making a scene, and Kevin had followed all the standard procedures. He grabbed the tablet that tracked all customer interactions and headed upstairs to the executive offices. Mr. Rodriguez's corner office had windows overlooking the entire showroom floor, and Kevin could see his own workspace from up there. Usually he loved that view. It made him feel important, like he was moving up in the world. Today, the view made him nervous. Mr. Rodriguez was sitting behind his desk with his laptop open, and he looked up when Kevin knocked on the door frame. "Come in and close the door behind you." That was never a good sign. Kevin sat down in the chair across from the desk and tried to read his boss's expression. Mr. Rodriguez had been running luxury car dealerships for over 20 years, and he'd seen everything. Nothing usually rattled him. "Kevin, I need you to tell me exactly what happened with the customer who was looking at the Lamborghini about 20 minutes ago." Kevin felt a wave of relief. If this was just about documenting the interaction, he could handle that. Standard situation, really. Guy came in dressed pretty casually, started looking at our most expensive inventory. I approached him to see what he was interested in. And then what? Well, he claimed he wanted to buy the Lambo, but when I asked for standard pre-qualification documentation, he got defensive. Started making up stories about buying cars here before, showed me some random key fob, the usual stuff people do when they're trying to bluff their way into a test drive. Mr. Rodriguez was typing notes on his laptop as Kevin spoke. Did you get his name? He never gave me one. Which was another red flag, honestly. Serious buyers don't have a problem identifying themselves. Describe him for me. Kevin described the man's appearance. The casual clothes, the baseball cap, the height, everything he could remember. Mr. Rodriguez kept typing, occasionally asking for clarification on details. And you're certain he'd never been here before? Absolutely. Certain. I know all our regular customers, boss. This guy was definitely a first-timer. Mr. Rodriguez stopped typing and looked directly at Kevin. Kevin, how long have you been working here? 3 years next month, you know that. And in those 3 years, have you ever seen this customer before? Mr. Rodriguez turned his laptop screen around so Kevin could see it. On the screen was a photo that made Kevin's blood turn cold. It was the same man from the showroom, but he looked completely different. He was wearing an expensive suit, standing next to Mr. Rodriguez himself, both of them holding keys and smiling at the camera. In the background, Kevin could see a Bugatti Chiron, the same type of car the man's key fob was for. That looks like... Kevin struggled to find words. That looks like the man you just kicked out of our showroom. Mr. Rodriguez finished. This photo was taken 18 months ago when he bought that Bugatti, paid cash, $3.2 million. Kevin felt like the room was spinning. But he was dressed like... Like what, Kevin? Like he couldn't afford... Kevin couldn't finish the sentence. It sounded horrible when he tried to say it out loud. Mr. Rodriguez clicked to another photo. Same man, different expensive car, different expensive suit. Then another photo, and another. Kevin counted at least 6 different vehicles. All of them, worth more than Kevin made in 5 years. His name is Antonio, Mr. Rodriguez said quietly. And he's not just a customer, Kevin. He's one of our biggest customers. He's also a business partner. Business partner? He invested in this dealership 2 years ago. He owns 40% of this business, Kevin. 40% of the company that signs your paychecks. Kevin felt like he was going to throw up. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? That's exactly the problem, Mr. Rodriguez said, his voice getting sharper. You weren't supposed to know. Antonio comes in here every few months dressed casually to see how we treat regular customers. He wants to make sure we're running the kind of business he'd be proud to own. Kevin's mind was racing, trying to process what he was hearing. So this was like a test? Every interaction with every customer is a test, Kevin. But yes, this was specifically a test to see if we treat people with respect regardless of how they look or dress. And I failed. Mr. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. Kevin, you didn't just fail, you failed spectacularly. Antonio called me as soon as he left the building. He told me everything that happened down there. Kevin tried to remember exactly what he'd said, but it was all a blur now. Had he been rude? Dismissive? He'd thought he was just being professional, protecting the dealership's interests. He said you questioned his right to even look at the cars, called them merchandise, accused him of wasting time, told him he didn't belong here. Each word hit Kevin like a physical blow. When Mr. Rodriguez repeated them back, they sounded so much worse than they had in the moment. I was just following procedures. Our procedures say to treat every customer with respect and dignity, regardless of their appearance. They don't say to interrogate people based on their clothes. Kevin slumped in his chair. What happens now? Mr. Rodriguez closed the laptop and looked out the window at the showroom floor below. That depends on Antonio. He's deciding whether he wants to continue his partnership with us, or if he thinks this incident represents something deeper about our company culture. One incident? Kevin, if we treat a multimillionaire business partner this way just because he's wearing casual clothes, how do you think we treat regular people who might not look wealthy? Antonio's not just upset about how you treated him. He's worried about what this says about how we treat everyone. Kevin felt a crushing weight settling on his chest. He'd thought he was protecting the dealership, but instead, he might have destroyed it. Is there anything I can do to fix this? Mr. Rodriguez looked at him for a long moment. I honestly don't know, Kevin. I really don't know. Kevin sat in silence for what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes. His mind kept replaying the conversation with Antonio, looking for signs he should have picked up on. The way Antonio had known specific details about the Lamborghini, the calm way he'd handled Kevin's aggressive questioning, the expensive key fob that Kevin had dismissed so easily. There's more you need to understand, Mr. Rodriguez said finally, breaking the uncomfortable silence. This isn't just about one bad customer interaction. Antonio has been coming here for 3 years, and this was the first time anyone has treated him this way. Kevin looked up from his hands. 3 years? He bought his first car from us before you even started working. Here, a custom Ferrari, then the Bugatti you saw in the photo. After that, a McLaren, 2 more Lamborghinis, a Rolls-Royce, and a Porsche. Every single purchase was over $200,000. The numbers made Kevin's head spin. How much has he spent here total? Mr. Rodriguez pulled up something on his computer. Including the investment he made in the business itself? Over $8 million. He's not just our biggest customer, Kevin. He's the reason we've been able to expand, hire more people, and compete with the bigger dealerships downtown. Kevin felt sick. I had no idea. That was the point. Antonio specifically asked us never to treat him differently because of his wealth. He said he'd grown up poor and knew what it felt like to be judged by his appearance. He wanted to make sure our dealership was the kind of place that treated everyone fairly. So when he comes in dressed casually, he's checking to see if we live up to those values. And until today, we always had. Kevin tried to imagine what it must have felt like from Antonio's perspective. Coming into a business he partially owned, being treated like he didn't belong, there being questioned and dismissed by an employee who worked for him without even knowing it. Mr. Rodriguez, I need you to know that I wasn't trying to be mean or discriminatory. I genuinely thought I was protecting the business. His boss nodded slowly. I believe that, Kevin. But that's part of the problem. You made assumptions about someone based purely on their appearance, and those assumptions led you to treat a human being poorly. What did Antonio say when he called you? Mr. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. He was disappointed but not surprised. He said this kind of thing happens to him regularly at high-end businesses, restaurants, hotels, stores. People see his casual clothes and assume he doesn't belong. Kevin thought about his own background. He'd grown up in a middle-class family, worked his way through college, and always prided himself on being fair and professional. The idea that he'd become the kind of person who judged others based on their clothes was hard to accept. Did he say anything else? He said the worst part wasn't being treated badly. It was realizing that if this is how we treat him when he's dressed casually, we probably treat other regular customers the same way. People who might not have millions of dollars, but still deserve respect. That hit Kevin harder than anything else. He thought about all the times he'd sized up customers in the first few seconds, deciding who was worth his time and attention based on their appearance or attitude. How many good people had he dismissed or treated poorly? He's right, isn't he? Kevin said quietly. What do you mean? I do this all the time. Not as extreme as today, but I definitely treat people differently based on how they look or how much money I think they have. Mr. Rodriguez didn't respond immediately, which was answer enough. So what happens now? Are you firing me? That's not my decision alone anymore. Antonio wants to meet with you tomorrow morning. He'll decide what consequences are appropriate. Kevin's stomach dropped. He wants to meet with me? 10 o'clock. Here in this office. What am I supposed to say to him? Mr. Rodriguez shrugged. The truth, I guess. Explain what you were thinking, why you acted the way you did, and what you've learned from this. Kevin spent the rest of the day in a fog. He tried to focus on work, but every time he looked at a customer, he wondered if he was making the same kinds of judgments that had gotten him into this mess. Janet kept asking if he was okay. but he couldn't bring himself to explain what had happened. That evening, Kevin went home and did something he hadn't done in years. He looked up information about bias and prejudice, trying to understand his own behavior. He read articles about how people make snap judgments about others, how those judgments affect their actions, and how much damage those assumptions can cause. He also looked up Antonio online. It wasn't hard to find information about him once. He knew what to search for. Antonio had started as a music producer, working with unknown artists in his garage. Over 15 years, he'd built one of the most successful independent record labels in the country. He discovered dozens of major artists and had expanded into other businesses, including real estate and technology startups. The more Kevin read, the worse he felt. Antonio was known for his charitable work, particularly with programs that helped young people from poor backgrounds get access to education and business opportunities. He'd grown up in housing projects and had worked multiple jobs to pay for college. His success story was exactly the kind that Kevin had always admired, and Kevin had treated him like garbage. The next morning, Kevin arrived at work 30 minutes early. He'd barely slept, spending most of the night rehearsing what he wanted to say. Every version of his apology sounded hollow and inadequate. At exactly 10 o'clock, Antonio walked into the dealership. This time, he was wearing an expensive suit, custom shoes, and a watch that probably cost more than Kevin's car. He looked every inch the successful businessman he was. Kevin watched from the showroom floor as Antonio went straight upstairs to Mr. Rodriguez's office. A few minutes later, Kevin's phone buzzed with a text message. "Come up now." Kevin took the elevator to the executive floor, his hands shaking slightly. When he knocked on Mr. Rodriguez's office door, Antonio's voice called out, "Come in." Kevin opened the door and saw Antonio sitting in the same chair Kevin had occupied the day before. Up close and in better lighting, Kevin could see that Antonio was probably in his early 40s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that made his behavior in the showroom even more embarrassing. "Have a seat, Kevin," Antonio said, gesturing to the other chair. Kevin sat down, trying to think of the right way to start. "Mr. Antonio, I want to apologize before you say anything," Antonio interrupted gently. "I want you to understand something. I'm not angry with you." Kevin blinked in surprise. "You're not?" "No. Disappointed? Yes. Concerned about what this means for the business? Absolutely. But not angry." "I don't understand." Antonio leaned forward slightly. "Kevin, what happened yesterday happens to me all the time. It's happened so often that I've stopped being surprised by it. What makes me sad is that each time it happens, it reminds me how much work we still have to do as a society." Kevin felt tears welling up in his eyes. Somehow Antonio's kindness made everything worse. "I know I messed up. I know I treated you terribly, and I have no excuse for it." "Actually," Antonio said, "I think you do have an excuse. And I think understanding that excuse might be the key to making sure this never happens again." Kevin stared at Antonio, confused by what he'd just heard. "I have an excuse?" Antonio nodded. "You were doing what you thought was right for the business. You were trying to protect expensive inventory from people you believed couldn't afford it. In your mind, you were being a good employee. But I was wrong. You were absolutely wrong. But the reason you were wrong is important." Antonio leaned back in his chair. "Tell me, Kevin, where did you learn to judge customers the way you did yesterday?" Kevin thought about it. "I guess from experience, from other people in sales. I don't know, it just seemed like common sense." "Common sense based on what?" "Based on..." Kevin stopped, realizing where this conversation was heading. "Based on assumptions about what wealthy people look like." "Exactly. And where do those assumptions come from?" Kevin felt uncomfortable, but he knew Antonio was trying to help him understand something important. Movies, TV, social media, the way rich people are usually portrayed, I guess. And what do they usually look like in those portrayals? Expensive clothes, fancy cars, perfect hair. Kevin trailed off, seeing the point Antonio was making. "So when someone doesn't fit that image, what conclusion do you draw? That they don't have money?" Kevin felt embarrassed saying it out loud. Antonio smiled, but it wasn't mocking. Kevin, I've been rich for about 8 years now. You know what I've learned in that time? Most truly wealthy people don't feel the need to prove it to strangers. We dress comfortably, we drive practical cars sometimes, and we don't walk around announcing our net worth. Then how is anyone supposed to know? That's exactly the right question, Antonio said. How is anyone supposed to know, and more importantly, why should it matter? Kevin realized he'd been thinking about this all wrong. It shouldn't matter. Right. Every customer who walks into this dealership deserves respect and professional service, regardless of their bank account. That's not just good business, it's basic human decency. Mr. Rodriguez, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. So what do we do now, Antonio? Kevin made a serious mistake, but he seems to understand what went wrong. Antonio was quiet, for a moment, looking directly at Kevin. Kevin, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. If I had walked into this dealership wearing a $3,000 suit and a Rolex, how would you have treated me? Kevin knew the answer immediately. Completely differently. I would have been polite, helpful, probably would have offered you coffee and given you my full attention. And that's the problem, Antonio said. Not just with you, but with this whole industry. We've created a system where people are treated based on their appearance rather than their humanity. Kevin felt the weight of what Antonio was saying. So what happens to me now? Antonio looked at Mr. Rodriguez, then back at Kevin. Well, I could have you fired. That would send a message that this behavior isn't acceptable. Kevin's heart sank. But firing you doesn't solve the real problem. It doesn't change the attitudes that led to this situation in the first place. What do you mean? Kevin, you're not the only person in this industry who thinks the way you thought yesterday. This happens at dealerships across the country every single day. Firing you might make me feel better, but it doesn't help anyone else learn from this mistake. Antonio stood up and walked to the window overlooking the showroom. I've been thinking about this all night, and I've decided I want to try something different. What kind of something? Mr. Rodriguez asked. I want Kevin to keep his job, but with some changes. Starting tomorrow, Kevin's going to spend a week working at each of our 3 other dealership locations. He's going to observe how other sales teams interact with customers, and he's going to document what he sees. Kevin wasn't sure if this was good news or bad news. Document what I see. Interactions where people are treated differently based on their appearance. Both positive and negative examples. Then you're going to come back here and help us develop a training program for the entire staff. A training program? About unconscious bias, customer service, and treating all people with dignity. You're going to help us make sure what happened yesterday never happens again, not just here but at all of our locations. Kevin felt a mixture of relief and terror. Antonio, I appreciate the second chance, but I'm not sure I'm qualified to develop training programs. You're more qualified than you think. You just experienced firsthand how these biases work and what damage they can cause. Plus, you won't be doing it alone. We're going to bring in some experts to help. Mr. Rodriguez looked intrigued. This could actually be really valuable for the whole company. Antonio nodded. I've been wanting to address this issue for a while, but I needed a concrete example to build the training around. Unfortunately, Kevin provided that example. But there's a catch, Antonio continued, turning back to Kevin. This only works if you're genuinely committed to changing, not just going through the motions to keep your job. Kevin thought about everything he'd learned in the past 24 hours. About his own prejudices, about the harm they could cause, about the kind of person he wanted to be. I am committed. What happened yesterday? I never want to make someone feel that way again. Good. Because this isn't just about you anymore. If this training program works here, I want to roll it out to other businesses I'm involved with. Hotels, restaurants, retail stores. Anywhere people might be judged based on their appearance. Kevin realized the scope of what Antonio was proposing. You want to turn my mistake into something that could help a lot of people. Exactly. Your mistake, but our solution. Over the next few weeks, Kevin threw himself into the project with an energy he'd never felt before. He visited other dealerships, sometimes dressed in expensive clothes and sometimes in casual wear, documenting the differences in how he was treated. The results were eye-opening and depressing. When he dressed casually, he was ignored, rushed, or treated with suspicion at nearly every location. When he wore expensive clothes, the same salespeople who had dismissed him earlier treated him like royalty. The pattern was consistent and disturbing. Working with professional trainers and diversity experts, Kevin helped develop a comprehensive program that addressed not just conscious discrimination, but the subtle, unconscious biases that affected how people treated customers every day. The training started with Kevin telling his own story, standing in front of his co-workers describing how he'd treated Antonio and what he'd learned from the experience was one of the hardest things he'd ever done. But it was also one of the most important. "I thought I was a good person," Kevin told the group during the first training session. "I thought I treated everyone fairly, but I realized that good intentions aren't enough if your actions don't match those intentions." The program was a huge success. Customer satisfaction scores improved dramatically, and more importantly, the culture of the dealership began to change. People started paying attention to their own biases and actively working to treat all customers with respect. 6 months later, Antonio came in for another unannounced visit. This time, he was dressed in paint-splattered jeans and an old t-shirt, looking like he'd just finished working on his house. Kevin watched from across the showroom as Janet approached Antonio with a warm smile, introduced herself, and asked how she could help him find the perfect car. Antonio caught Kevin's eye and nodded approvingly. The message was clear. They'd learned the lesson, and they were applying it every day. Later that afternoon, Antonio bought another car, his 8th purchase from the dealership. As he signed the paperwork, he looked at Kevin and said, "You know, I'm proud of the work you've done. You took a terrible mistake and turned it into something that's helping people." Kevin smiled. "Thank you for giving me the chance to make it right." "Thank you for taking that chance seriously," Antonio replied. "That's what real change looks like."